Hey, everybody. We're live and ready to go. How's everyone doing today? This Friday evening, for us, Friday evening. For me, later in the evening. For you, earlier in the evening. Alexander in London. How are things going?
They're going well. I mean, it's been a beautiful day here. I went out walking. It got a bit dark, so of course I had to use my Patriot beacon in case anybody doesn't know what that is. But I mean, I had my flashlight to keep me in touch with my dogs and to see my way. I did see well in the dark. But other than that, it's been an absolutely great day, very interesting. And of course, here in Britain, we're all watching and waiting to see what Boris is going to achieve. He's back in London. Yeah. He's back in London, by the way, but his meeting with Ursula von Leyen didn't get very far, it seems. And it's now back to Mr. Frost and Monsieur Barnier, and they're trying to negotiate a deal, but we've been told to prepare for a no-deal Brexit. So we'll see whether that happens. I mean, the fact that we've been told to prepare for it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It could be bluff. It could be a high-stakes game of poker. We shall see.
Well, the fact that he went to Brussels and he came back in one piece is a very good sign for Brexit. That's for sure.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't think he should have gone to Brussels at all. I couldn't see what the point of that trip was, but certainly, and it wasn't said in the media as far as I know, but I know there were some people muttering in the fringes that it reminded them of Chamberlain's trip to Munich in 1938. Well, that was obviously going much too far, but in the end, nothing like that happened. I mean, he didn't fold. He didn't give away anything. He didn't sell the shop or let the side down, to switch metaphors or whatever, any of those things. He came back to London in one piece, and well, we'll see whether the negotiations go anywhere. But the clock is now definitely running down.
All right, great. Hello, Spartan Warrior Queen, our awesome moderator. How are you doing this evening? Spartan Warrior Queen, thank you very much for moderating another live stream. This is a first for the Duran because we are also streaming live at this very moment to Facebook as well. So we welcome all of our followers or friends. I don't even know what they call them at Facebook anymore. Welcome all of you at Facebook tuning in as well. And of course, we have got the great, best community in all of the internet and all of YouTube for sure. And that is everybody in the Duran community. Alexander, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that they're both our followers and our friends. That's certainly how I see them. So a great welcome to all of you. And always, it's a huge pleasure to interact.
To our friends in South Africa, I saw some people checking in from South Africa. That's my South Africa mug. And let's see. We have got a lot to talk about, actually. So everyone, wherever you're checking in from, welcome. I see people in England, South Africa, Fiji, Canada, USA, all over Europe, Amsterdam. Where else? A real quick around the world. A game I still play, actually, when I play basketball all the time around the world. Let's see where else people are checking in from very, very quickly, because we have a lot to discuss. Canada, Germany. Awesome. Let's see where else. NYC, England. More people from Canada. That's great, because we are going to be talking about Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. Greetings from Toronto, Australia, France, Florida, Slovenia, Lechat, how are you? Antarctica, Finfreak, good to have you here. Scotland, Jersey. All right, Somerset, Morocco. Awesome to have you. Following us from Morocco, Sweden, Iran, Edinburgh, London, East England, Portugal. Great to have you with us. Harry, Ireland. Great country of Ireland. Good to have you here. Essex, Turkey. How are you doing, everyone in Turkey? Valies in Ohio. How are you, Valies? All right, South Africa again. Egypt. All right, beautiful country, Egypt. And Arizona. My one-time home, Arizona. Great to have you here from Arizona, Washington, Somerset. All right. Assange. Yeah, Assange. Let's hope that we get a pardon for Assange.
Well, indeed. And can I just remind our viewers, on the 4th of January, the court, Judge Baritza, District Judge Baritza of the Westminster Magistrates Court, is due to hand down judgment on the extradition hearing. So lots of people in Britain are watching and following that very, very closely now. The Assange case took a long time to attract a lot of attention in Britain, but it has now, and people are much more interested in it than they were a year ago.
All right. Hello to everyone in Kuwait, to New Zealand, to LA. All right, let's get into it. Alexander, we'll talk about three people today, and they're all connected in an interesting way. Actually, you could say maybe they're connected via country more than anything else. You have the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who is making a ton of news. Not for anything that he has done positive, but for things that he was caught trying to do in the past. And a big hats off to Rebel News and Ezra Levant, who broke this story.
Yes.
And he broke a big one, that's for sure. Yeah. Broke a blockbuster. And then we're going to talk about our good friend Hunter. Where is Hunter? Well, Hunter is all over the news of late. And that should make everyone very, very suspicious because they are letting Hunter be all over the news and get in the news cycle. And there's a reason they're letting the Hunter thing come out, and there's a reason they're reporting on it now. And we have, I think, one pretty good theory as to why they're doing that, but we'll definitely get into Hunter, the laptop, the FBI investigation, the tax investigation, the statement from the Biden transition team. And it's not only Hunter, it's actually Jim Biden as well, Joe Biden's brother, who is also, from what I understand, being investigated. And according to CNN, irony of all ironies, according to CNN, the son and the brother of Joe Biden are being investigated for more than just tax evasion. How about that? CNN is actually reporting that Joe Biden's family is in deep water.
And Politico as well, by the way.
And Politico as well, yes. And then we're going to have to definitely talk about Attorney General Barr. And wow, what a blockbuster story this is that's been surfaced. And it looks like Barr has got a lot of answering to do for what he has done, or perhaps what he has not done is probably a better way to put it, because Barr has remained silent on a lot of things, specifically stuff about Hunter, and he remains silent for a reason, it seems. So yeah, told you Barr was the deep state. That's what Liz says. Yeah, Liz, 100% right. 100% right. Look, when Barr came in, I personally thought, man, this guy is coming in and he's cleaning house, and it looked that way. But boy, did I call Barr way off. I called Barr way off, and the masks are coming off. But guys, anyone that's joining us for the first time, welcome to everyone joining us from Facebook. I have with me the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. And Alexander, I will start it off. As I pass it off to you, I will start it off and say, we may have fallen a little bit off with Barr, maybe a lot off with Barr. And it looks like Barr is not the person we thought he was. But if there is one story that we have been right on from the get-go, it has been Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and of course, Hunter. We have been reporting on Hunter Biden on this channel for the better part of a year and a half. And I personally have been reporting on Hunter Biden and Burisma from 2014. Yes.
So that gives you
Mercouris. The floor is yours.
That is absolutely correct. Alex is reporting about it for long before anyone else was interested. And I should add, this is before we even set up the Duran. The Duran was set up in 2016. We did cover the Hunter Biden story in the Duran in our website fairly soon after the Duran was set up. But Alex was covering it even earlier than that. So that gives you some idea. We were absolutely right on every particular about the Hunter Biden story. But I'm going to say quickly that we'll come to Hunter Biden and Barr in a moment, just to say that it is one of these stories. What has happened over the last few days has made me extremely angry. And there was smoke coming out of my ears, metaphorically speaking, of course, last night as I was reading through all the media reports about it. I mean, it is so outrageous what has happened that I just find it almost difficult to contain myself. So just be aware of that. And if I'm not my usual temperate self, well, please understand that I do have strong feelings about this, because once again, due process and the rights of a certain person, Donald Trump, and because he was the subject of an impeachment case, were violated in a most grotesque way. But we will come to all of this in due course. I think we're going to start with.
We need to talk about secret military exercises.
Yeah.
And Justin Trudeau. Alexander, what's going on with this story?
Well, can I just say before we start, when I first read about this, and this is all about a story about the Chinese military being invited by Trudeau to conduct military exercises in Canada in winter. I presume this is the winter, by the way, of 2019, 2020. I mean, I thought this simply can't be true. I mean, it looks so astonishing and so bizarre. And it turns out it's completely true. Now, let's take a step back and try and recollect what happened. So in 2018, the Canadian authorities arrest Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou. She is, of course, an important Chinese official, rather important official of this Chinese company, which is known to be very close to the Chinese state, and which is backed by the Chinese state. And Huawei, exactly. And the United States, this arrest takes place in response to an extradition request from the United States. And by the way, those extradition proceedings are still ongoing in Canada. They seem to have got completely bogged down, but we don't need to go into them in any more detail. Then a few weeks later, the Chinese arrest two Canadian citizens. One is Michael Kovrig, a former diplomat, and another is Michael Spavor, a businessman. They're detained in late 2018. The Chinese accuse them both of spying, but it is universally believed, including in Canada, that these two people were arrested by the Chinese in order to get Meng Wanzhou back. In other words, they are hostages. They are Chinese hostages. So what does Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, do? Firstly, he sends a team of Canadian troops to participate in some sort of military games in China, to be precise, in Wuhan, in October 2019. And then he invites the Chinese military to carry out winter exercises in Canada. Canada, of course, being very close to the US and, part of the North American defense system. Anyway, the Canadian military, the military chiefs in Canada say, no, we can't possibly have that happen. And they countermand it. And they also point out to Trudeau, well, we're worried that if these people, these military people from China come, they won't just be soldiers. Some of them will be spies. And remember, the whole Huawei business is all about spying too. So lots of security concerns. So what does Trudeau do? He is apparently furious. He is incredibly angry with the Canadian military because they countermand and block him from arranging this exercise with China. This whole thing is then kept secret from the Canadian people. Bear in mind, there's been elections in Canada and all this. And of course, we now have it all leaking in this extraordinary way. Now, can I just make a simple and obvious observation? The Canadian government says that Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, the two Michaels, as they're apparently referred to, are in effect hostages of China. Do you hold military exercises with the country that's holding your citizens hostage? I mean, that seems to me so ludicrous at so many levels that I find that absolutely astonishing in itself. The other thing is, we have, as all the world knows, a major dispute going on between the United States and China, the United States being Canada's most important and critical ally. More and more NATO countries are essentially align themselves with the United States in this conflict with China. And what does Trudeau propose to do? He proposes to have military exercises on Canadian territory, in other words, in North America, with the military of China. I find this so extraordinary. I find this so bizarre that it is almost beyond, as I said, comprehension. And I wonder why. I would be very interested to know what people in Canada are saying about this. And I'm sure there are people from Canada. I know there are people from Canada following us and listening to us now. And perhaps they can come up with some sort of explanation for this very strange behavior, because strange doesn't seem to me to capture it. It is bizarre. And the fact that he is apparently, Trudeau is so determined to rebuild relationships with China and to maintain them and to bring them up to a whole extra level by conducting exercises with the Chinese at this sort of time astonishes me. And I wonder what the reaction to all of that in Canada is.
Well, Trudeau has, in the past, he's always said many good things about Canada, about China.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he's always seemed to have a soft spot for China. I mean, I went back and listened to many of his speeches and some of the town halls that he has done, and he has always admired the government and the system that China does have. I mean, he's openly said it. But I think of Trudeau, Alexander, and this may be a reason why all this is happening. And I'd like you to kind of dig into it, and maybe you can find a reason why Trudeau has taken this position with China to the point where he's invited their military into Canada. When you look back at, I call them the neoliberal rat pack, and you go to those glory days of that rat pack, Obama, Trudeau, Merkel, Renzi, Hollande, Cameron, there you have the neoliberal rat pack. And with Obama, tagging alongside him was Joe Biden. And tagging alongside Joe Biden was his son, Hunter. And this is what ties this live stream together. We know that Hunter was going to China and was working with China, whether it was CFC Energy or any of the other business ventures he had going on there. He was working with China to make a lot of money, billions. We know that that's a fact now. I mean, we've got the Senate reports. And I wonder, back in the days of that neoliberal rat pack, if people like Trudeau and Merkel, maybe, who are pretty much the remaining few leaders of those neoliberal rat pack glory days, I wonder if they haven't just resigned themselves to the fact that China is going to be the next superpower in their minds. They're saying, you know what? China is going to win this trade war with Trump. China is going to come out on top. And so it's better for me as Justin Trudeau to position myself and those around me in order to benefit from the rise of China. Do you think that's a possibility? Because at the end of the day, you always look at stuff like this. And to me, 99% of the time, it always comes down to money and power. And I would say money trumps power as well. But you're always looking at follow the money. Where is the money in all of this? And we also know over the past week that China is obviously targeting U.S. politicians, U.S. business people, Wall Street execs, in order to gain influence and power in the United States. And I'm sure that's a monetary exchange, as well as an exchange of other things in the case of Eric Swalwell and Christine Fang. But you know what I mean.
Absolutely, of course I do, and I'm sure you're right to some extent. I mean, I think that there is a widespread perception, perhaps a premature perception or belief, that China is the land of the rising sun, if you like, the great force that's coming. Angela Merkel, by the way, definitely seems to think that. She goes to China regularly, and she's got very, very close and friendly relations with the Chinese leaders. So previously did David Cameron, by the way, our former British Prime Minister. Cameron and George Osborne, the British finance minister, who was working with Cameron, they actually inaugurated what they called a golden age of relations with China, positioning Britain as closely to China economically and commercially as possible. And of course, the Chinese are the people with the very deep pockets who come there. They invest in people's economies. They buy goods. They do deals. Clearly, there's large sums of money involved. But I'm going to come back to Trudeau now. Maybe he shares all those views. Maybe he has all these views that China is what's coming. And, I think that's all premature, but you're right, that's his view. He doesn't know China very well, is all I can say, because if he thinks that groveling to the Chinese in this way, after they arrest two of your people, the two Michaels, and hold them in effect as hostages, is the way to win them over, then he has misunderstood China completely. It is the way to lose their respect. They will say, well, this man Trudeau, he's absolutely spineless. We can arrest his people as we like. We can say whatever we want about him and whatever we want about his country. And by the way, the things the Chinese have said about Canada and about Trudeau in particular after Meng Wanzhou's arrest have been off the scale. We can do all of those things. And at the same time, he will come along and say, well, I'm so unconcerned and unbothered and untroubled by that I'm delighted to have your military in my country. I mean, the Chinese will have no respect for him or for Canada at all. And if you approach China in that fashion, they will steamroll right over you. Now, can I say, this is not a criticism of China. China is extremely tough about asserting itself and asserting its own national interests. Perhaps, arguably, all countries should be. But a country that does not assert itself in response, like Canada, will lose China's respect. And the Chinese will simply come and they'll demand more and more, and they'll give less and less, because that's the way China is. And, it's so obvious to me that, I struggle again to understand why Trudeau doesn't see it. I mean, at the end of the day, the correct way to maintain a good relationship with China is to make it very clear to the Chinese what you will tolerate and what you won't. Make your deals, stick to them, negotiate hard, negotiate tough, and then they will respect you. If you capitulate to them when they arrest your citizens, and bear in mind, it's the Canadians who are saying that these two Michaels were arrested in retaliation for the arrest of Meng Wanzhou. I mean, the Chinese say they were spies. It's the Canadians who say they're being held as hostages. If Canada is so little concerned with the protection of its citizens, then, as I said, the Chinese will say to themselves, well, these people are not people we should take seriously.
All right, so let's take a step back to the arrest of Huawei, Miss Meng, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the CFO, I believe she's the CFO and the daughter of the
founder, exactly,
founder.
absolutely,
Okay, so
absolutely.
powerful
Yeah,
person.
very powerful person, one of the most powerful people. Because, to be very clear, China is structured differently from the West, and there is much more of an overlap between government and business than there is anywhere in the West. So she's a very, very powerful person in China, a very important person in China, certainly a person who is absolutely within the elite of China. I mean, people like Xi Jinping will know her, or at least know of her.
Okay, so Canada arrests her on behalf of the U.S. I think that's
Yes.
that's no secret that the
No.
U.S. is putting pressure to arrest her, and it all comes down to the trade war, the tariff war between the U.S. and China, which was started by Trump,
Yes.
President Trump, and he took a very strong line against China.
Yes.
Not that he ever had anything bad to say about Xi Jinping, actually the
No.
exact opposite. He said many good things about Xi Jinping,
Yes.
to be honest.
Yes.
But when it came to negotiating with China, there was no doubt that Trump was going to take a very firm stance and a hard line against China. And he did just that.
Yes.
And I come to think Trudeau's motivation in arresting the Huawei executive, what would that be if he would just come around a year or two later and then kowtow to the Chinese military? And I think to myself, maybe at the time he was playing both sides of the coin there, and he may have thought that Trump may have had the upper hand in the beginning of the trade war, but then the closer things got to the election, perhaps Trudeau said, you know what, I'm going to cash in my chips now with China because I see a different administration coming in, an administration that welcomes China.
Yes. Well,
for lack of a better word, that works with China, that supports China, that is the Biden family. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, in fairness to Trudeau, he will say that he wasn't involved in the Meng arrest at all, that this was all done by the police and judicial authorities, and he doesn't interfere in those sort of things. If you believe that, as I always like to say, I have a bridge to sell you. These kinds of arrests always have an important and serious political dimension. Now, I think what it shows, again, is that Trudeau is one of these weak, manipulative, frankly, completely untrustworthy people who basically tries to keep friendly and on side with everyone. So Trump wants Meng Wanzhou arrested, or at least the US government wants Meng Wanzhou arrested and extradited to the US. So he arrests her. But notice, he hasn't yet actually extradited her. She's still in Canada. I mean, there is very complicated legal proceedings, which I don't, fully follow. But she is still actually in Canada as we're talking. And there's even apparently talk now of some kind of deal being done to release her in return for her confessing to some sort of, minor or less important or less serious charges. So he bows to the US, and then, in order to try and keep the Chinese on side, he comes along and he tries to suck up to them too. So firstly, he participates in this exercise in Wuhan. This is in October 2019. Then last year, he goes ahead and starts saying, well, let's have this exercise with the Chinese military in Canada herself. Now, this is apparently all happening in late 2019. So what is going on in the United States at that time? The answer is, firstly, Donald Trump is facing impeachment. So already Trump's position perhaps doesn't look that stable. And it's pretty obvious, if you're following these events very closely, that and if you're connected to the Democratic Party in the way that Trudeau, of course, he's very close to the Democrats, that the Democratic Party establishment is going to unite behind Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is the person who's coming. So it seems to me that he may have very well have said to himself, well, we will get a change of administration or a change of president in the United States before very long. Joe Biden is certainly the person who's probably on the way. Even if it's not Joe Biden himself, it will probably be someone very like him. Quite possibly, Donald Trump's strong anti-China policy will not be followed through. So, since I don't want to really break relations with China, I want to be on good terms with China because that's what I'm all about. Well, here's the way that I'm going to find some way of trying to please the Chinese and tell them, well, just ignore the Meng Wanzhou episode. That was all a big slip. It's all Donald Trump's fault. We'll send her back. We'll have the troops here. And please, 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 in return, send our hostages back too. So that would not surprise me if those were his calculations. But again, let me repeat, I think if those were his calculations, then he has completely misunderstood China. The Chinese will not be impressed by any of this. I am sure they think less of him for doing this. If preserving good relations with China was his priority, he should never have agreed to have Meng Wanzhou arrested, or at least made it very clear to the US if she was going to be arrested in Canada, it would be because she has broken some Canadian laws. He should never have agreed to that request. That would have been a strong position. The US would have respected it. The Chinese would have respected it. On the other hand, if he was going to arrest her, as he did, and the Chinese countered by arresting Canadian citizens, then the right thing for him to do in that situation would be to say to the Chinese, right, you've arrested 2 Canadian citizens. This is completely unacceptable and intolerable behavior. We will not be blackmailed, and we're going to downgrade our relations, and we're going to bring them to a very, very bad or low spot. The Chinese, again, would have respected and understood that. This appeasement, and I use that word carefully, is exactly the wrong way to do things.
All right. I've got two questions, two threads that I want to explore with you. Let's do this one first. If Trump did not start the trade war with China, do you think we would have had a much different Trump presidency? And it leads into my second question, because one thing that is becoming very, very obvious to me is China's immense, and I mean immense, influence and power in North America.
Yes, and in Europe.
Let's stay with Canada and the US.
Yes.
It's becoming dead clear to me, especially this last week or two. I mean, God, this last week or two, we've seen a China that really is infiltrated just about every aspect of the power structure in the United States, and in Canada. It seems like they've got the entire Canadian government under their thumb, because it's not only Trudeau. Yes. There were a lot of people in his cabinet that were making frequent trips to China, and they were, for lack of a better word, they were partying it up. Absolutely. I mean, they really were. They were enjoying every minute of it. Once again, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with that per se, but it seems to me that China's really dug in to the U.S. and Canada. So I asked myself, if Trump did not, can I say pick a fight? I don't want to say pick a fight, but if Trump did not put America first, that's a good way. If Trump didn't put America first and decide to negotiate tough with China, he said, I'm going to take a tough line with China, what do you think the outcome would have been?
Well, can I just first of all say, when you said that, you don't think that, the question about whether or not it's right or wrong to get so close to China, I think if you are a political leader in your own country, it is completely wrong to get so close to a country that is such a powerful competitor, partner also, and potential adversary. You need to maintain your distance. Once upon a time, Western leaders understood this. What has clearly happened is that China and the US and some of its other allies have become very, very enmeshed in China. We noticed this in Europe, by the way. I remember there was this expression we used to have about Chimerica, that, the China and the US were almost becoming one country, because clearly the political elites of the two were becoming, and economic and business elites were becoming so intermingled. And by the way, there were some people in Europe who were concerned about this, but the result was it wasn't actually chimerica, because that assumes some kind of equality, some sort of equal balance. It's very, very clear now that the people who were openly benefiting from this were the Chinese, because they came to it in a completely purposeful and tough-minded way. Whereas I have to say, it's increasingly looking to me as if many people in Washington and in Ottawa and in London and in Berlin were basically in it for what they could get. So you had this psychological imbalance. One lot, the Chinese, are pursuing in a very tough-minded and very hard-nosed way their interests. The others are forgetting about the greater interests of their own country, and in their anxiety to embrace this powerful newcomer with the deep pockets and to make good from all of that, they completely forgot their own interests. And then what happens? Donald Trump comes along, complete as outsider to all of this. He's not really involved in China in any significant way. I mean, there was an attempt to try and pretend a few weeks ago, if you remember, during the election, that he was, but we discussed that on one of our programs, and we said this is absolutely, minuscule what he's been involved in compared to what the others have. So he comes along, he looks at the way in which the industrial states of the United States have been hollowed out. He looks at the steady rise of Chinese power. He's worried about, the livelihoods of American workers. He says, enough, we've got to stop. This whole process has got to be reversed. We must make America great again. We must get American jobs for American workers. We want to see American companies opening factories in America, in the northeast of the United States, where they used to be, and elsewhere in America, not in China, and employing US scientists and college graduates, not importing them from all over the world. And we must start fighting for our own interests again. And of course, what that has done is that it has shocked and upset all of those people who beforehand had said to themselves, well, here's this very nice arrangement which we have with the Chinese. We're able to cut all these deals with them. We're able to make all kinds of profitable contacts with them. We can do it as lobbyists. We can do it as consultants. Our sons and daughters, we're going to come to Hunter Biden in a short time, can make huge amounts of money for it. We're benefiting indirectly from that too. So here comes Donald Trump, and he's going to spoil our party. And that may very well explain this extraordinary hatred to Donald Trump that so many people within the Washington establishment seem to have. I've often wondered about it. It has often seemed to me irrational. But of course, if Donald Trump was hurting them directly in their pocketbooks by upsetting these cozy arrangements that they had made with the Chinese, then that would explain why so many of them are so angry with him in such a vocal and powerful way. And you asked me whether that would have had an effect on his presidency. I think it would have made all the difference. It would make all the difference. We would not perhaps have had all this vitriol directed at Donald Trump, but then he really would have been the successor of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama.
Yeah, I mean, we've not everybody, but a lot of people now are starting to see that that China is the main competitor to the United States, not the Russia distraction that we were fed for 3-4 years. That was obvious. That's crystal clear. That Russia was a distraction, and China played along with it really well, actually.
Absolutely, they've used it. I'm not anti-Chinese at all. On the contrary, I think they've played their cards with immense skill. I mean, they've sat back as the United States and all kinds of people in London and Paris and Berlin and Frankfurt and Brussels and Washington and New York have been fulminating about the Russians, who, to be very clear, are a significant military power, but by no means an all-aspect competitor in the way that the Chinese are. And whilst the US has been, diverted itself doing all of this and worrying about places like South Ossetia and what goes on in the Donbass and all those things, China has been building up its power. And it hasn't just been building up its power, it's also won over Russia. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to say, but I mean, it's now got the Russians essentially on side with all the enormous natural resources and advanced technologies that the Russians have. I mean, I was reading a very interesting article by a very interesting analyst who said that, from now on, the Russians, for example, are going to start downgrading their economic links with Europe because they're all going to be diverted in China's direction. So it's the Chinese who are going to get Russia's oil, it's Russia's gas, Russia's precious metals, all of those things. And we've achieved that because we were basically, our leaders were not so much asleep at the wheel, more that they didn't want to see the challenge that China was posing because they would personally, or their families, or the businesses that were connected to them. When I talk about businesses, the Wall Street oligarchs in New York, the tech oligarchs in San Francisco, they were doing very well out of this arrangement with China. So they were happy to let it continue as China grew ever more in power. And we will see whether the point of no return has been reached. I think it may be the case that Trudeau, for one, thinks so, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the tech companies and Wall Street want to continue to do well. I mean, that's obvious. They don't want the America first, the tough America first policy to be implemented, and that's why they're called globalists. Well, and when you think of globalism, I mean, really, the engine of globalism is where?
Well,
it's China. I mean, when you think about globalism, where stuff is made.
It's the primary beneficiary of it. And again, I mean, I'm not criticizing. I don't blame him at all. I'd say, good for him. Xi Jinping comes along to Davos and he talks about, quite openly there, about the importance of preserving globalism. Because, of course, he's its great beneficiary. So is China. And the Davos crowd, the World Economic Forum people, are thrilled, and they applaud him, and they receive him with open champagne bottles. But it's contrary to the policy, to the interests of so many people in the United States and in the West. So here comes Donald Trump, talks about making America great again, and that's not what these people in Davos want to hear. I am astonished. I still am astonished at how many people in the United States consider a slogan like a "Make America Great great again, which has been used, by the way, before by other people. Franklin Roosevelt during the Depression said something very similar. How many people find that slogan of Trump's controversial? I mean, I would have thought putting your own country first is a no-brainer if you're a leader of a country. Obviously, that doesn't mean you break international law. Obviously, that doesn't mean you go around the world looking for fights. But then Donald Trump didn't actually look for fights, as he's pointed out again just recently. He didn't actually start any wars. So why people got so upset by that slogan, I have never been able to, well, I mean, I hadn't been able to understand. Now I think I understand it better.
All right. So with Hunter Biden, it looks like that I have two theories with Hunter, and it ties into Trudeau as well. With Hunter Biden, I think all this stuff is coming out. Either number one, it's coming out from the Democrats and the DNC in order to pave the way for a Harris presidency. So they're preparing us, but we'll get to that later when we talk about Barr. I also think there may be a China threat as well, in that now that much of the United States and Canada is very well aware as to China's presence in their country at the highest levels. You know, I would imagine that China has to adapt now in their program to unseat the West as the number one power in the world. So they can't be as covert anymore, because people now understand what they're up to. They understand that they have people like Eric Swalwell, you know, in their pocket. They understand this now. We all know this. They understand that you have people like Trudeau inviting the military in. People understand this. So I wonder if much of Hunter, what's going on with Hunter Biden and all this media attention now on Hunter Biden, is at the behest of China. In other words, China telling much of the mainstream media and big tech, go ahead now and cut him loose. Cut him loose. He's a liability now, and the Bidens are a liability more than they are a help. We've done business in the past. We were great business partners, but now we don't need them anymore. And I think the same for Trudeau, because Trudeau has been, I mean, my God, how many scandals has this guy been involved in? I'm counting, I think I can count 4 or 5 right now, scandals, and he has survived every one. But I wonder if he will survive this one, and if the Chinese won't also say, you know what, maybe it's time for some new leadership in Canada, because Trudeau is of no use to us anymore either.
I'm not sure. I mean, I have to say, I think the Chinese probably don't welcome this amount of attention, both in Canada, both about their relationship with Trudeau and about their connections with Hunter Biden. I mean, they've been extremely reticent about it, and I'm not sure that they particularly want to be seen publicly and openly involving themselves in the United States and in its politics in this kind of way. So I think they're going to be a little bit actually unsettled by these articles and these revelations that have happened both in Canada and the United States. But certainly they will reorient their policies. I don't think they've given up on them. And we've had this extraordinary video of this Chinese academic openly bragging about the enormous influence China now has in high places, which is really quite extraordinary to see. I mean, so I go along with that up to a certain point, but not all the way. I don't think they've decided we're cutting off Hunter Biden at this point. But I mean, let's talk about Hunter Biden, because there's some extraordinary things. There's some very, very important things to say. And I think before we get into the sort of inner things, let's just take a few steps back. Let's go back a year and a half. We had, well, actually a year ago, the Democrats were cranking up to impeach Donald Trump on the basis that Donald Trump had supposedly tried to get a foreign government, Ukraine, to carry out an investigation of Joe and Hunter Biden. And this was said to be absolutely outrageous. And we were hearing endless comments about how the Bidens had done nothing wrong and that there was no evidence that the Bidens had done anything wrong. And now we find that, in fact, throughout that entire period of that impeachment, right from its inception, right up to the point when, the impeachment finally collapsed, Hunter Biden was under investigation by the Justice Department and the FBI. And this fact was never disclosed to Donald Trump, to his legal team who were defending him in the impeachment, to the US Congress, or to the American people. I mean, that is astonishing. That was an act which withheld from the president, from his legal defenders, from the Congress, and from the American people, something which was absolutely key to the impeachment. If in September, October 2019, when the Democrats moved for impeachment, the Justice Department had disclosed that actually, in fact, Hunter Biden was under investigation for suspected tax evasion and money laundering. And we're going to come to that in a moment. That whole impeachment would then and there have collapsed, because the whole impeachment was predicated on Trump trying to fabricate a case against the Bidens when the Bidens supposedly had done nothing wrong. So, I mean, it's astonishing, it's incredible, it's most disturbing, and that was what happened. So that's the first thing to say about this. The second thing to say is, of course, then after all of that, we have the whole election. We have the election in which, as we know, Giuliani and various people, they found this laptop in Delaware. The computer repairman in Delaware comes along. He says, I've discovered this laptop. We have all these stories appearing. This is during the election. And the US, the laptop is passed to the FBI. We've also had reports from the Committee for Homeland Security in the Senate making various extremely serious allegations about the Bidens. And what happens? We are repeatedly trolled. We are repeatedly told throughout this election that this is all Russian disinformation. It must all be suppressed. And moreover, that the Bidens have done nothing wrong. Joe Biden comes along in one of the election debates with Donald Trump. I think it was the one with Chris Wallace. And he actually appears to lend weight to the story that it is all a Russian disinformation campaign. He refers to this letter by all those ex-intelligence officers, including Brennan and Clapper and Comey and all those, in which they say that this bears all the classic hallmarks of Russian disinformation. That is his reply to Donald Trump's questions about Hunter Biden. So he's lending credence to all of that. And of course, he must have known when he said that his son was actually under investigation by the Justice Department and the FBI. Now, what happens? He's elected, and we had this announcement that Hunter Biden is under investigation by the Justice Department and the FBI. And whom does it come from? It doesn't come from the Justice Department or the FBI. It doesn't come from Hunter Biden himself, contrary to what people are saying. It doesn't come from Hunter Biden's lawyers. It comes from the Biden transition team. Is Hunter Biden part of that transition team? Is he going to be involved in his father's administration? Presumably not. We are told no. So why is the transition team coming up with this kind of announcement? I think this whole thing is beyond disturbing. And I want to just get on to the role of the Justice Department in all of this, remaining silent during the impeachment, remaining silent during the transition, during the election, allowing the Bidens themselves to go around insinuating that, there's nothing untoward going on, that this is all Russian disinformation, and saying and doing nothing. And I'm going to quote a section from an article by National Review. This is a conservative Republican news site, but one which is hostile in many ways to Donald Trump. And this was written before Bill Barr's role in all of this was disclosed. It says, another disquieting aspect to the story is how the Department of Justice purportedly participating in burying it. Sources told Fox News and others that the DOJ is super sensitive about moving investigations from covert to overt during an election if they believe it could potentially affect the outcome. Their political sensitivities are irrelevant. We need to know more, but tamping down an investigation to hide it from the public before an election is as bad as accelerating an investigation to smear someone. It is entirely bad. This was something the American people needed to know. The article goes on to say, law enforcement is tasked with investigating criminality, not with assessing how their work will shape public perception during an election. Rather than following due process, bureaucrats are now making investigatory decisions that could easily be construed as helping politicians who are either their boss or their future boss. So it was a political decision. And may I just add that embarrassing or affecting public perception during the impeachment would not have been the same anyway as affecting public perception during the election, but they concealed it in both cases.
They did it twice. Barr did it twice. He did it. Now we know that he was burying the Hunter investigation and the Hunter probe, as well as the Jim Biden probe. Yes. So he was burying that, the laptop, the whole thing.
Yes.
But he also buried the fact that he appointed John Durham special counsel as well in October. So exactly. He didn't disclose that fact. Not only did he not disclose it to the American people, he didn't tell President Trump either.
He didn't tell.
So Barr was hiding a lot of things.
Yes. I find that incredibly disturbing and extremely serious. Extremely serious, because both of those things, the fact that John Durham had been appointed special counsel and the fact that Hunter Biden was under investigation, when, as I said, there were all those allegations flying around that all those stories about Hunter Biden were Russian disinformation, and with Joe Biden himself lending credence to those stories about it being Russian disinformation. By concealing those things, by concealing these investigations from the American people, Barr let the American people form a false view of what was going on in the run-up to the election which was coming. If the American people had known these things, which they had a right to know, it would have affected, quite possibly, how they perceived things in the election and how they might have voted. So he acted most improperly on both occasions. He is an extremely skilled jurist. He knows that this is wrong, and yet he did it nonetheless. And before anybody of our viewers brings up the Hatch Act, which no doubt we will discuss, disclosing these facts would not have been a violation of the Hatch Act.
Well, Barr knew what he was doing, and there's a reason that he didn't disclose this stuff. I mean, that we know, and I think everyone that's viewing this live stream knows why he didn't disclose this stuff. Obviously, the disclosure of these things would have been in the benefit of the Trump campaign and to the detriment of the Bidens. It's really interesting that the transition team would make a statement like that about Joe Biden's son, considering that during the entire campaign, Joe Biden made it a point to say that his son has absolutely zero to do with politics or with his campaign. I mean, his campaign made it a specific point to note that Hunter Biden has absolutely zero connection to Joe Biden's politics or the Biden political machine. But yet you have the transition team having to come out with a statement saying that that Hunter Biden is under investigation. Nothing happens in a vacuum, though.
No.
And I think about these past 2 weeks, and I think about the past 2 months, and you start to realize that you have this CFC scandal, which we knew about 2 months ago, and now everyone is going to know about. We have the Chinese government using this energy pop-up company. It's not a real company. I doubt it's a real company, but they use this to entice people who are hungry for riches and for money, obviously.
Yes.
And we know this week that they use other operatives like Christine Fang to entice people who are hungry for other things. But all of this stuff is coming out, and now you have the revelation that Barr was also hiding a lot of things. It seems to me that I still can't put my finger on it, but some big moves are being made. In China, big moves are being made in the U.S. and with the Biden team, and I think that the Democrats may also be trying to position things so that come maybe 6 months from now, we'll be talking about President Harris instead of President Biden.
That is true. Can I just explain why I think this announcement about Hunter Biden came out? I suspect that the Democrats have either been tipped off or are worried that Barr is going to appoint another special counsel to continue the investigations, the Hunter Biden investigation. I'm not saying he will. I'm not absolutely sure he will, but I think it is highly likely that he will, because he can argue, it seems to me plausibly, that as Hunter Biden is the president-elect's son, there is a conflict of interest in the new administration, which would make it very difficult for a attorney general appointed by his father to actually oversee an investigation of the president's son. So I think that the Democrats are nervous about this. They've obviously always known. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, I said Joe Biden must have known about this investigation. Hunter Biden obviously knew about this investigation. What did Schiff know? I mean, what did Schiff know during all that impeachment? Did he know that Hunter Biden was under investigation? I think we should be told. I think Schiff should explain to us what he knew. What did Pelosi know? But anyway, let's park that to one side for the moment. I think, as I said, this may have been done for that reason, because they were afraid that a Justice Department announcement was coming, and they thought to get in the blow-in first. And they did that by trying to imply that this is just a tax investigation, when it is actually apparently also a money laundering investigation. Now, the money laundering is arguably the more serious of the two, because of course money laundering is about receiving money and trying to conceal it, and that begs lots of questions. Conceal it because who is it intended for? Is it intended for Hunter Biden, or is it intended for someone else? Remember some of the things that were being suggested at the time of the when we were doing the programs about Burisma, about how it all looked, the Ukrainian payments looked very much like protection money for Burisma and its oligarch owner, to protect him from investigations in Ukraine by buying the favor of the Bidens. I mean, that could point towards some sort of money laundering investigation there. And of course, if you go back to the things that Tony Bobulinski was saying, then we are looking at money laundering, possibly money laundering allegations on an entirely different scale involving China, also perhaps involving someone else. So I want to be very careful. I don't know the scope of this investigation, but it is the money laundering part of it that I am interested in. And if you also remember, going back briefly, and again, I have to be very careful what I say now, when we looked at the Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security, the Senate committee report, the Homeland Security report there about Hunter Biden that came out back in the summer, and they made certain very serious allegations relating to trafficking, human trafficking. They contained a quotation there, which seemed to me at the time to originate with a federal agency. And that really now, I think we can say with confidence, points to the FBI. Now, we don't know whether that forms any part of this investigation also, but there was allegations of money being paid to various parties in Ukraine and Russia, and that might also involve money laundering too. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to probe too far or say too much because this investigation is still underway, but it's the money laundering part of it that I would be particularly focused on at the moment. So that's why I think that announcement by the transition team was made. I think they were nervous that the Justice Department was about to make its own announcement, so they rushed their own announcement out in order to give the impression that this was just a tax investigation and to take the attention away from the money laundering, which is probably much more serious. Where does this leave Joe Biden? We shall see. Where does this leave relations between the US and China? That is going to be far more problematic. The Swalwell business shows that there is a huge amount of interaction between the US and China at many different levels. I think we haven't even begun to see the whole of it, or even more than a tiny fraction of it. But perhaps we will start to see more, and we will see how the Chinese respond, and we will see how the people in Washington respond to as these investigations, if they're allowed to proceed, close in.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the Senate report, and we have some concrete numbers as well that the Senate report exposes as far as the money that was changing hands. The most famous one is the 3.5 million from Moscow, from London, but the former Moscow mayor's ex-wife's transfer of 3.5 million. That's the most famous. But we also have amounts which are much larger.
Yes,
that were getting funneled to Hunter Biden, and actually we have amounts that the Senate report has outlined that were coming from Hunter Biden to Russian and Ukrainian residents in the United States that was getting funneled back to Eastern Europe. Now, I would imagine that tracing this money would be fairly easy for the Department of Justice, and I think it would be pretty much a slam dunk to understand. Once you have the money trail, to understand what this money was being used for. And, in our own discussions and video and investigation, we also have a fairly clear understanding as to what was going down in Ukraine with the money laundering and the money that was coming in, whether it was from U.S. taxpayer money, IMF loans, or EU structural funds, whatever was going into Ukraine, and how it was being siphoned off out the back door to come, back to the globalist elites, the Lagardes, the Bidens, all these people. You have the money trails. This is easy to find, but my question to you is, Barr may be opening up another investigation, another special counsel into these money trails, but I doubt it's to bring people to justice, given his track record with how he did in Russiagate, where he has indicted all but one person, which was a low-level guy, Kleinsmith, for nothing, pretty much for lying and a slap on the wrist. If anything, Barr is doing this for political purposes, and we've detailed this. The hunch is, I imagine, from McConnell and the Republican higher ups, is 2022, win the House, 2024, get a Republican establishment candidate into the White House. So Barr is pretty much setting up he's setting up the pitch. He's setting it all up for the Republicans to come in February, March, April, and just knock it out by getting Biden out of there. And maybe the Democrats are trying to preempt that and say, you know what, we understand where you're going with this, so we're also going to work to get this Biden equation out of here.
That I think is actually the agenda. I don't think we've discussed the Republican Party leadership, especially in the Senate, many times. And it seems to me that Barr is clearly very closely connected to those people. He was George H.W. Bush's Attorney General, so he is absolutely part of that world. So it seems to me that what he is doing is basically what they wanted him to do. They didn't particularly. They got to the point back in 2019 when they realized that Russiagate, the Mueller investigation, was becoming an absurd embarrassment, and it was causing damage to the Republicans themselves, and it may have accounted for some of the losses the Republicans suffered in the 2008 midterms. So Barr, who is I repeat this, a very able jurist, was brought in to close Mueller down, but at the same time, he wasn't really there to help Donald Trump. So he slow walked the Russiagate, investigation of the investigators, the one that Duran is conducting. He kept the investigation of Hunter Biden under wraps. Now that Trump, the election is out of the way, he's coming forward. He's appointed Duran special counsel, so the Duran can continue the investigation of the investigators. And interestingly enough, we're getting all sorts of new information about how, all this related and how the Democrats were involved in all of that. There's been some very interesting revelations from which have been publicized by Washington Examiner and by John Solomon and all sorts of Washington Examiner especially. So use the Durham investigation to hurt the Democrats, and then also get a new investigation up and running of Joe Biden and his family, and embarrass them too, perhaps by having a special counsel look at him, look at all the dealings that they were involved in also. That way, you've got rid of Trump, you destabilize Biden, you set the scene for a Republican landslide in 2022. The Republicans get the House back. The Republicans either improve their majority in the Senate or gain control of the Senate, and then the scene is set for a establishment Republican, someone that the GOP establishment likes, a Jeb Bush type figure, to become president in 2024. That, it seems to me, is a plausible scenario. There is another one, which is that what Barr really wants to do is to bury all these stories. So he's appointing all these special counsel. He's appointed Durham special counsel. He's slow walked the Hunter Biden investigation. I mean, bear in mind, it's been ongoing now for 2 years. That is a very long investigation. Very long investigation. I mean, why is it taking that long? I mean, what exactly is the still to investigate? But anyway, that's another story. So he's slow walking both investigations. A new president is coming in. There's special counsel appointed. Barr can say, well, I did all that I could do. I, got these 2 investigations running, but then they will gradually be allowed to fade away, and normal business in Washington will be restored. It seems to me that's also a possibility too, and we shouldn't discount it. So I don't know. Well, I'm not able to enter Bill Barr's mind, but whatever his agenda is, the fact is he has failed his president, and not just his president, but the American people also.
Well, they never considered him his president. That's the bottom line. Because when you look
exactly.
at the actions they've done, and we'll get to super chats, guys, real quick with his final thought. When you look at their actions, And I'll start with just three specific actions from the Republicans. Number one is we know that they knew the Mueller investigation was a hoax. We know as a fact that they read all the information, all the underlying evidence, and they knew the entire thing was a complete sham. The entire dossier was a complete joke. Lindsey Graham knew it, Grassley knew it, and McConnell knew it. And they knew this back in 2017, but they continued to mislead and lie to the American people and say that we have to have a special counsel. If you fire Mueller, he's a man of integrity. If you fire him, President Trump, then we will impeach you. We have to go on with this special counsel. We need the truth. They knew the truth right from the beginning, and we know this now. This is fact that they knew exactly what was contained in that dossier and in that entire report, and they knew it was a complete bogus document. They knew it, but they let the whole thing continue. And now we have these other two bits of evidence, which is number one, Barr was slow walking the entire Russiagate investigation, only to appoint Durham as special counsel without telling anybody. And we also know that he has been literally sitting on this Hunter stuff for the better part of a year after we all know exactly what was on that laptop. We have the messages, we have the audio, we have the video, we've got all of it. And yet Barr was sitting on it. So three things that the Republican establishment has done, which show that they may have wanted Trump out more than Pelosi wanted Trump out.
Yes. Well, indeed, because I mean, it's important to say that by remaining silent, by preserving silence about these things, by concealing the evidence of Sean Henry, the president of CrowdStrike, that there was no definite evidence that the Russians had hacked the DNC computers, by concealing the fact, which is apparently long ago by the Republicans, way back into 2017, that the Steele dossier was basically a load of nonsense. And by the way, the latest information that I've heard is that, which is on Washington Examiner, is that some parts of the Steele dossier came from this young woman in Cyprus who had a disliked her boss and was exchanging gossip with this operative at Brookings. But another part of it came from Corey Scherer, who is, of course, a Clinton associate. And so, again, apparently this was known in 2017, and it's all kept secret. So they concealed all of that. And that, of course, allowed stories about Donald Trump being somehow compromised by the Russians, about his campaign team having colluded with the Russians, to continue to circulate for more than a year. The Republicans let that happen. And in Barr's case, with the Hunter revelations, by remaining silent about the investigations, we allowed all the stories about Hunter, and there being no evidence, no reason, nothing to suggest that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden had ever done anything wrong, and that this is all Russian disinformation. Again, Barr allowed that untruth to circulate also. And bear in mind that untruth about, being Russian disinformation was used by so-called fact checkers, this extraordinary new breed of creature that has emerged over the last few years and has proliferated.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, don't get me started. But they jumped on all of that, and of course the social media giants leapt on it too. So there you are. That Barr knew that was not true. He is the Attorney General of the United States, and he let all that falsehood continue to circulate. Sometimes you lie by silence. Bear that in mind. So should our viewers. The Republicans lied by silence by allowing all those lies about Donald Trump being a Russian agent to continue to circulate. And Barr, in my opinion, if he, at least allowed lies to continue to circulate, was in effect complicit in the lie that this was all this business with Hunter Biden was Russian disinformation, when it clearly was not.
Yeah. Well, the Russian disinformation was more to do with the Russian distraction on many levels.
Well, this is the thing they always did. I mean, they always used it. But bear in mind, one person who made use of it was Joe Biden himself. I remember this vividly when, as I said, I think it was the Chris Wallace debate. If I'm wrong about that, viewers can correct me, but I think it was the Chris Wallace debate. I remember him being challenged by Donald Trump about all of this, about all that was going on with Hunter. And there was Joe saying, well, all these intelligence officers have said that this is a classic Russian disinformation exercise. Former intelligence officers, that this is a Russian disinformation exercise. So he hid behind that falsehood, and Barr let him do it.
The Republicans let him do it,
and the Republicans let him do it
because including Fox News, they let the whole thing slide.
Yeah,
and China took advantage of it.
China takes advantage because that's actually so. Let's actually focus on that briefly, because that's the most important thing. Because the Chinese are listening and watching, and they see all of this. And they're going to say the United States is in disarray. There is ample evidence of us coming along and infiltrating the United States. We've got this business with Swalwell, for example, and notice how little coverage of that there has been. The media, the establishment media, has basically tried to sit on that story. Contrast that with how they ran away with all sorts of extraordinary stories about Donald Trump Jr. when she met that Russian lawyer in Trump Tower, and it was all over in 15 minutes. That was a big news story, even though absolutely nothing happened, nothing improper even happened. And Swalwell, well, nothing to see, nothing to say. Christine Fang, we don't want to talk about her. She's gone away. She's forgotten. This doesn't exist. The story is nowhere. So the Chinese are watching all of this. They're watching that. They're also watching how revelations about Hunter Biden's involvement with China and with Chinese business things, how the United States can't get its act together responding to those. And they're saying to themselves, the United States is rotten fruit ripe for picking. That's how the Chinese will see this.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Trump had has some good friends on the Republican side, to be fair, in the House.
Absolutely.
There's Jordan, Nunes, Getz. He does have some allies there, McCarthy. So that's a good thing. And it does look like there are some new media channels that are gaining a lot of steam in Newsmax and One America Network, which seem to be much more aligned with the America First mantra. Fox News, obviously, I think people misunderstood Fox News, including myself, where there are some people that are allied with the America First movement. Fox News, people think they changed sides during the entire campaign and the election. They didn't change sides. No. I think they have always been an establishment Republican media organization. And when push came to shove, they chose the side of the establishment Republicans, because that's what they're about. Their allegiance, Fox News' allegiance, was never to Trump or to MAGA or to any of that stuff. Their allegiance was always to the establishment Republican power structure.
Yes.
And that's where I think there's a lot of confusion with Fox News. So Fox News really hasn't changed at all. They were loyal before Trump to the Republican establishment, and they're loyal to this very day to that Republican establishment.
I think what you make is an extremely good point, because, of course, the point is, and this is a critically important point, the United States is not just its political elite. There is a mass of people out there in the United States, tens upon tens upon tens of millions of people. 75 million people voted for Donald Trump in the election that there's just been. There are millions of people in the United States. There are decent, law-abiding, patriotic people. They have not given up. And they are able to organize. They now see more clearly, I suspect, than they have ever seen before, some of the things that go on in their country. And I expect that there will be a mighty backlash. I was already reading somewhere, I think it was on Zero Hedge, that one of these new TV companies has now actually briefly overtaken Fox News.
Newsmax, yeah.
Newsmax. So both the elite are probably going to find that they can't control this in the way that they assume. I think the Republican establishment may think that they could leverage in a establishment Republican in 2024. The Democrats may think that they can, carry on very much as they always have, use the media and the tech companies to, suppress criticism and dissent and conceal stories like the Hunter Biden story, that they can use the Russian smear indefinitely. I think what they're actually going to find is that this is all running out, and that that a critical mass of the American people is now coming together, and it will actually begin before very long to push back. So the Chinese may find that in these very cynical assumptions that I've just discussed, they will be proved wrong. But if they are proved wrong, it will be because of the American people, not because of the elite. The elite, clearly, of the United States is no longer fit for purpose. In fact, it doesn't seem to be connected to the United States in any significant way anymore.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. That's why they are called globalists.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, we've come full circle. All right, guys. Let's. You want to do some super chats? Anything else you want to add?
No. I think so. Let's do some super chats.
Let's get to some. We have some really good questions here. It's super chats from Iris. 99-cent super chat. Thank you very much, Iris. From Valley S, a $20 super chat. Thank you very much, Valley S. As always, thank you very much. From Pia Robinson. $5 super chat. Love you, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Pia, for that super chat. We appreciate it. From Pilgrim Media. $2 super chat. I lived in the UK in 78 to 82. Not the same country. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Oh, no. I mean, I of course remember the UK 78 to 82, and it is absolutely not the same country now. I mean, Margaret Thatcher transformed Britain in many ways, fundamental ways. And I have to say, so in a way did Tony Blair. And in Blair's case, I mean, we are living with those consequences very much now. I mean, it was Blair who brought in, who created this globalization that we see. And by the way, it was also Blair who was really keen on, getting very close to China too, and the European Union.
Tony Blair. Yeah.
Tony Blair.
All right. From Sparky, if Biden drops out, state electors will be free to vote for Hillary. There's no requirement to move VP-elect Kamala up to president-elect.
Well, this is very true.
Point.
It's a very interesting theory. It's very, very, very interesting thing. We'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. My guess is that unless we get an awful lot more revelations between now over the next few weeks, this Hunter Biden business is going to be a slow burn. And I think we will probably start to see it really have an impact after the inauguration.
All right, from Moon Swan Silverlight, £20 super chat. Hey lads, keep up the good work. Got my mug and received my maroon Duran shirt. English flag. Awesome. 2 days ago. I'm wearing it right now. It's nice to have a shirt that has full sleeves as opposed to my usual quarter length. Thank you very much, Moon Swan, for that super chat, and thank you for supporting us via our Duran shops. Our Duran shop, you will find the link in the description box down below. I was going to say Duran shop store, but no need to say that. You'll find a link to the Duran shop down below, and you'll find great merchandise, including those English flag shirts from Sparky, $5 super chat. The blatant election, I have to be careful with my words, Sparky, in your super chat, unfortunately. The blatant thing that took place on November 3rd is an obvious insurrection. I'm all for Trump using the Insurrection Act. I think I could say that. Otherwise, what is it for?
Well,
we'll be careful with this one.
We'll be very careful.
Giving new terms.
Yeah, indeed, quite so. Yeah. Not going to happen. I mean, he's not going to use the Insurrection Act. So I think we need to be realistic about that. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, but Trump operates within
the law,
and within the negotiating space. He is the great negotiator.
Exactly.
Let's not forget that he is the great negotiator, and I think he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve when it comes to negotiating. So I think that's where he's most comfortable.
Exactly.
Anyway, we'll see.
Exactly. I should also add that I think he is also, and I'm not saying it's his only agenda, but I'm sure he's looking at 2024 very carefully also.
Let's see. From David Martin, could they go after big tech by targeting the data they collect and sell instead of Section 230? Say they make user data private property. Would big tech need to give a percent to the user, or say who they sell to? That's an interesting one. Actually, there's some news that Tulsi Gabbard has actually come out with. She's tabled a proposal to take on big tech, and she's actually proposing to strengthen 230. That is the right approach.
Absolutely.
Do not get rid of Section 230.
Yeah.
Strengthen and enforce it. If you get rid of Section 230, then the entire internet completely collapses. Yes. What you want to do is you want to strengthen 230.
Yeah.
And what else in this? User data. Well, Facebook makes all its money from user data, as do all of these companies. So I don't know about giving a piece of that money to the user. I don't even know if that's possible.
No, it's. I think this is a huge question. I mean that in a complimentary way. I think this is a very interesting question. I think it's something we do really need to think about. We are very interested in this topic. Perhaps we can think about it further, and if we can think of something more constructive to say, we should actually return to it, because certainly misuse or data misuse has been a very big issue. But whether that's going to be the thing that's going to lead to the downfall of the tech giants, I'm not so sure. And whether that's really what people are going to be coming after the tech giants for, I'm not so sure either. But possibly there may be financial issues, compensatory issues that arise from this. I could just about see a potential legal point there, but I'm afraid it's one that I'd really need to think about a lot more and a lot more carefully, and perhaps do some reading on to give a really clear view on it.
Yeah, look, I mean, what the U.S. has to do right now is they have to deal with Section 230 and enforcing it.
Exactly.
Before they get into user data and data privacy, which
I
think is really difficult because it's baked into much of the internet.
I entirely agree with that. I mean, it's making Section 230 a reality, because at the moment it's a fiction. Let's be very clear about it. I mean, it exists, but it has no real enforcement mechanisms behind it, and there's no real guidelines as to how it should work. It's basically left to the tech companies to decide it for themselves, without any kind of regulation or supervision at all, and with no external right of appeal. So that's what you need to do. You need to look at Section 230 and to beef it up and to make it very much stronger. And perhaps you also need to look at antitrust actions. And I understand that there's now some of the US states are coming together and demanding antitrust actions against. I think it was Facebook, actually.
Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see what comes from all of this. Anyway,
Right.
it's a very interesting subject.
From Sparky, China's military will be in a position to assist Biden if President Trump uses the Insurrection Act to keep him or whichever China puppet out of office.
Well,
and the follow-up to that is, without China's help, Bill Clinton loses in 1996.
Well, that's a very good point, because, of course, I think it is now widely accepted that China did intervene in 1996, did interfere rather in the US election in 1996, when, by the way, China was a far weaker and poorer country than it is today. So it had far more limited resources in 1996 than it does today, but that it did interfere in 1996, and that it interfered on a big scale in order to help Bill Clinton win. And of course, he did win. I mean, we can never prove that it was because of China's intervention that he won, but the precedent was made. And again, I am sure the Chinese went away and said to themselves, well, US politics, we can involve ourselves in them, interfere in them, help presidents, do all sorts of things. And it's easy for us to do. And there are no consequences for us.
No, they'll just blame Russia.
Well,
they'll blame Russia. We can interfere, but they'll blame Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Because I said that there's no cost to anybody for blaming Russia. Trade between the US and Russia is minimal. Trade between US and China is enormous. There are massive US investments in China. There are massive Chinese investments in the US. There are hardly any US investments in Russia, hardly any in Russian investments in the US outside the New York property market, where some Russian oligarchs, buy up properties, and in places like Miami and those sort of places too. So that's a fundamental difference. There is no real loss for someone saying, the Russians are bad, because nobody in the US is directly affected by it.
All right. From Jola, can you comment on Poland and Hungary agreeing to the EU budget?
Yeah, I was surprised that they did it so easily and so quickly, actually. I mean, we had all those statements from the Hungarians and the Poles that they were going to stand firm. And then we had all those threats from the Europeans that if they did, the Europeans would find some kind of device to circumvent their veto. And I was skeptical about the legality of that. But then we get this news about this agreement whereby the Hungarians and the Poles have now dropped their veto, and they've agreed to the budget in return for a non-binding statement, which says that this rule of law provision will be interpreted in certain ways that will not affect or hurt Hungary and Poland to any great extent. Hungarians and the Poles really believe that non-binding statements like that are going to have any real influence on what the European Commission does. Then all I can say is that they're being incredibly naive. I can definitely say that this statement is not worth the paper it's written on. Why did they do it? I'm going to make a guess that Poland, which is a very divided country and which receives very large amounts of EU funding, in the end came under a lot of pressure and buckled, and that Orban just wasn't prepared to go on by himself. That's my guess. But I was surprised and disappointed that this climb down took place in the way that it did.
Okay, from Sparky, American millennials were taught in American schools that America is the root of all evil, so the globalists have a whole generation to work with. That is
True. Yeah.
True statement. From Yuri Bezmenov.
Can I just say, I mean, I remember when I studied US history at university, because I actually one of those things I actually opted to study for Russian history and US history, and it was very interesting to compare the two. I read a history of the United States by an American historian. I think it was Zinn, and I have to say, I thought to myself, reading it, I'd be very, very sorry to be a citizen of a country where a historian writes about his own country in such an extraordinarily negative way. And it seems to me that culture has become so embedded in the United States now, and it is incredibly corrosive. No doubt the United States has things that it needs to feel, that it did wrong in its past, but it has so much to be proud of also. Okay, so much more to be proud of also.
Yeah, well, the universities have become toxic, that's for sure.
Well,
all right, from Life of Brian 999, is Trump trying to override the vote by having the Senate legislatures appoint electors? Seems like a bad strategy. Why not keep the goal of matching signatures?
Well, again, we have to be extremely careful about what we say. I don't know what Trump's strategy is. There is a court case before the Supreme Court. We will see where that goes. It's very interesting that both blocks of states are now filing amicus briefs. But as I understand it, the purpose of this legal case is to get the Supreme Court to authorize that the houses of representatives of the states should be able to pick the electors. We will see whether that happens. I'm not sure it's going to work. I don't think it's a particularly good strategy. As it happens, seems to me an overcomplicated one which carries high risk. But we will see what the Supreme Court of the United States decides.
All right, from Neda, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Neda. From Teresa, $7.99 super chat. Thank you very much, Teresa. From Anatoly, ruble $8.99. I heard Barr limited Durham's investigation to events after May 2017. Does it mean all VIPs are safe, but the Republicans who knew of the deception are in the crosshairs?
We have so many rumors and stories about the Durham investigation that it's very, very unwise to make any assumptions. All I will say is this. I've read Barr's letter of instructions to Durham, and I didn't see any date like that in that letter. Now, of course, if we go back to Mueller, Rosenstein wrote a letter instructing Mueller, a special counsel, and setting out what the contours of Mueller's investigation were. And I assumed that this was all done in good faith. I was more naive and less worldly about American politics in those days, and became increasingly bewildered as Mueller was going further and further and further away from what was delimited in this letter that Rosenstein had written and signed and which had been published. And of course, it then turned out that actually Rosenstein, shortly after, wrote another letter to Mueller, which he kept secret, in which he gave completely different instructions to Mueller, authorizing him to investigate all sorts of other things. So the letter that Rosenstein published was effectively a fiction. It was a nonsense. It had no reality to it at all. The same may be true of the letter Barr has published of setting out his instructions to Durham. All I will say is I didn't see any date like that in that letter. And I would be surprised if the Durham investigation was limited in quite that way. But we will see.
From Sparky, Trump hired people with different thinking. He thought he could win over. He ended up with Cicero's proverbial enemy from within with a different agenda.
This is a point which has been made extremely well by Byron York in his book Obsession, in that Donald Trump came to Washington with a very ambitious agenda, with a very clear idea of the things he wanted to do, and assuming that if he explained it, he'd be able to win people over. He'd be able to win over people like Comey. He'd be able to win over the Democrats, that he'd find friends who would help him with what he wanted to do in Washington. And he relied on his humanity and his warmth and his charm, which apparently is very real if you come up against Trump in person. And of course, what he discovered is that, in fact, in Washington, in the jungle that is Washington, that cut no ice at all. People paid no attention to that. They still went on working against him and undermining him, even as he tried to win them over by appointing them to senior positions in his administration, which was an extremely foolish thing for him to do. I think he now knows and realizes his mistake, but then, of course, it's too late.
All right. From Michelle, a $25 super chat. Hey, you all, the Dems think because there is a time crunch, we should forget about what happened on November 3rd. I'll be careful with that word. What happened on November 3rd? Because there is a time crunch, we should forget about it. I don't think people are going to forget.
No.
At all.
No.
I don't think so. I think this movement is here to stay for the long haul.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's important to stress tens upon tens upon tens of millions of people voted for Donald Trump in that election. They're not going anywhere. They're in fact, their numbers will grow. That's my prediction anyway.
From Michelle again, another super chat. President Trump is the winner and will be declared winner, and Joe Biden to Gitmo.
Well, again, I mean, we have to be very careful what we can say about this. I mean, we will just have to wait and see.
Yeah, there's a lot to play out. We'll say that there's a lot to play out still.
Yes,
definitely,
yes.
Michelle. There's a lot to play out.
Yes.
From Toilet Sauce, a €5 super chat. It seems to me Barr helped the deep state get Biden in office, only to then remove him from office as quickly as possible.
Well, this I think sums up what is the likely Republican strategy in a nutshell, which is that they didn't really ever like Donald Trump. Donald Trump wasn't the person they ever wanted to see in the White House. He ruffled many feathers in the Republican Party. He's not part of the Washington elite. He's certainly not somebody, as I said, with connections with China to any significant extent, as we've discussed. So they didn't want him there. They prefer a election which he loses, but they've now busy planting bombs under a Biden administration, which is what Barr is there to help them do. Not very difficult, by the way, given the kind of background and past that Biden has.
Yeah. Oh, the Dems too. The Dems don't want him in there either. The Dems wanted Kamala from the get-go.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
She was such a terrible candidate that they had to figure out another way.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think we all got a little, it was all interesting, but people were talking about Hillary Clinton stepping in, and in fact, I think the agenda was to get Kamala into the White House all along. I think that was what it was all about. They realized when she completely bombed during the primaries that there was no chance that she would become even the Democratic Party's nominee for the president, let alone, be elected president. So they had to find some other way to do it. So they brought out, El Cid, as I refer to him, the dead man walking, Sleepy Joe. And they sent him into battle. He's done his job. Kamala is now in the White House as VP. And then, of course, the time will come to say, Sleepy Joe, goodbye.
All right. From Fad Bumps, PHP 50. The importance of Trump winning this is immense. Yeah, there's a lot on the line. There's a lot on the line.
Exactly.
We'll leave it there. There is a lot on the line, that's for sure.
Yes.
From Phoenix Barley, late but starting now. Thank you very much. $4.99. Thank you very much for that super chat. From Mark B for $1.99. What is Kamala Harris's history on corruption?
Well, very good question. I mean, she was a prosecutor, of course, in California. I don't actually know that much about her. I know some things about her political views. My impression.
Terrible.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, there you go. I mean, she is a completely establishment Democrat. Yeah. I mean, she is that to her absolute fingertips. I mean, that's the simple as that. You don't need to know more about her than that, it seems to me.
From Sparky, too bad there's nothing to prevent slow rolling as a tool enabling fake investigations, like the writ of habeas corpus encourages speedy trials.
Well, very true, actually. I mean, can I just say, I mean, we've said some things about Bill Barr, and absolutely right and correct things. But if he hadn't intervened when he did, the Mueller investigation would have carried on right up to the election. The Democrats were never going to let it go. And it's appalling that that can happen. It's absolutely shocking that an investigation like that isn't required to come and produce its evidence and provide regular reports to Congress and to the American people explaining what they've discovered. I mean, if Mueller had come to the American people in the autumn of 2017 and said, I have found no evidence of collusion between Donald Trump and his campaign and the Russians, that would have been an enormous thing. I mean, he could have then said, well, I'm investigating other things like, whatever. But if he'd actually cleared the air on that issue in itself, that would have been something. And of course, he didn't even need to do that. And the Republicans colluded in it. We'll see whether Durham and whoever is in charge of the Hunter investigation, there must be someone in charge, by the way. I think it's the US attorney in Delaware, whom I know nothing about, by the way. We'll see whether they get appointed special counsel too.
In hindsight, I'll say that it would have been better if the Mueller investigation did not stop. In hindsight, knowing what we know now, I think it would be better if the Mueller investigation just continued all the way up.
Well, indeed. Well,
because
indeed.
you wouldn't have had all this other stuff that came out, and maybe you wouldn't have had people like the good Dr. Fauci taking up a lot of airtime on mainstream media as well. I don't know. Maybe it would have been better to have had Mueller, keep on occupying everyone's attention.
Very, very true, actually. I mean, given what a complete nonsense that turned out to be, what an obvious nonsense that turned out to be.
Yeah. From Michelle Corley, $5 super chat. Thank you, Michelle. President Trump and the military will come to save the day. Remember President Lincoln. A lot of people are talking about the comparisons with Lincoln.
Yeah, yes. I don't think we're in that situation at the moment in the United States. I think that was an extraordinary crisis. And I mean, it's important to remember that when Lincoln acted as he did act, after the inauguration, it was in a situation where states were seceding from the Union. So there was already talk of civil war in the run up to this. So I don't think that is a comparison that is valid now. It may become so in time. And this event that we have just been through and are still going through, and these investigations that we are looking into, that may accelerate the moment when we get into that kind of scenario, but we're not there yet.
From Sparky, $2 super chat. Trump got more done with Pelosi than with Paul Ryan. True.
Oh, absolutely true. That is so true.
Paul Ryan, not like Trump.
Well, Paul Ryan is still there, by the way, and he's still making all kinds of comments, and they're not helpful to Trump at all.
No. From Michelle, $5 super chat. Thank you, Michelle. Miss Pelosi has more to worry about than Hunter now. Her secrets.
I come back to this very obvious question. It was Pelosi, of course, who ultimately took the decision to go for the impeachment last year. What did she know? Did she know that Hunter Biden was under investigation? I mean, it's a simple question. I mean, I don't know the answer to it, by the way. That is a real question. If she did know that he was under investigation, then I think, straightforwardly, she should resign as Speaker.
She's not going anywhere.
No.
She's there till the very end.
Oh, I know. I know. Well, I mean, if she did know, she won't tell us anyway. So I mean, it was all that. But I mean, really, what she did, I said I was I'm going to try and be temperate in my words. What if she knew what she did last year was beyond outrageous? I mean, it was just. I mean, it was always stupid. It was always stupid. It was always wrong. But I mean, it would have been grossly unethical as well. Again, I'm using perhaps more moderate words than I feel, because frankly, my feelings about this are extremely strong.
Yeah. Dan Crenshaw destroyed her on the House floor the other day.
Yeah, no,
by the way.
absolutely.
He had issue with the fact that Pelosi weaponized the much of the funds earmarked for the American people to deal with the lockdowns.
Yes.
And she delayed those in order to damage Trump during the
Correct.
campaign.
Correct.
He just really good video. I'll look for it and I'll put it up. Maybe I'll
Excellent.
put it up.
Excellent.
From Sparky, establishment Dems withdrew McConnell's opponent's money in 2018 because they wanted to leave an establishment majority leader, McConnell, in office.
Well, yes. I mean, we've discussed this in previous programs. I mean, it's obvious to me now that the Republican establishment in the Senate and in the Congress, I'm not talking about every Republican in the Senate and in Congress. I'm not talking about Devin Nunes. I'm not talking about Rand Paul. But the establishment Republicans are much closer to establishment Democrats than they are to Donald Trump. I think that is indisputable now. I think anybody who can't see that is blind to reality.
All right, from Michelle Corley, $5 super chat. Alfred Welber sent me some info about the CCP involvement in our shot. I haven't read all, but it's compelling. And when I say shot, people know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
The shot.
Okay. Yeah.
So there actually was news today that Australia is also stopping the development of their shot. It wasn't working.
Well, there we go. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I heard about that also.
Yeah,
I heard about that also.
I don't know much about the CCP one, but I do know the Russian one doesn't use mRNA. I think it's just a more basic type of.
It is. I mean, it is. Well, again, please don't take this as any kind of, because I really don't understand these things at all. But I understand from what I've heard that it's the simplest one you could possibly develop to deal with this kind of problem. I mean, it's an absolute, bargain basement thing. It may be that makes it work better. It may be that it works less well. I don't know. I just haven't got the knowledge to be able to say.
Yeah. From JHW, I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Isoroku Yamamoto. Torah is equal to Dems plus FBI plus DOJ. Wow, well said.
Well, that's brilliantly said, beautifully said, actually.
Very well said. From Sparky, early 80s, London included Jenny Agutter is in An American Werewolf in London. Wow.
Wow, okay.
That was a great movie. Yes.
Yeah.
American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Great movie, absolutely.
From Sparky again, Barr's Senate confirmation was too easy. Good point.
Very good point.
That's a very good point, actually.
Very, very good point, actually, yeah.
From Charlie, $5 super chat. Great show as always. Can you both provide one or two authors you both enjoy reading often, preferably history genre, world, US mainly? Well, we should actually we should do one better. You can name one now, Alexander. But what we should do is we'll put a list in our description box, and people can go to Amazon and get books directly. So I don't know if you want to draw out a name or two now, but we should put a list.
Yeah, I think let's definitely do that. When it comes to American authors, I mean, I read huge amounts of American history, but a long time ago. And I have to say, I mean, I was always very interested in US military history, for example, and also US Civil War history was something, and the whole New Deal period. But to be honest, it's such a long time since I read that the authors don't come straightforwardly to mind. The history book, I always turn to. My single favorite history book ever is one by a man called Geoffrey de Saint-Croix, which is on the origins of the Peloponnesian War that was fought between Athens and Sparta. And I think it's the best book on international relations anyone has written.
Excellent. So we'll try to put a link for
Yeah,
books.
yeah.
Box from Moonswan Silverlight, £5 super chat. Speaking of big tech, will anything get done about big tech censorship, assuming Trump becomes president again?
Well, we'll see. I mean, he didn't achieve anything in his 4 years.
Big mistake.
Big mistake. Huge mistake. And what I will say again is this: I think more people are aware of this problem now than has ever been true before. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, nobody was talking about this. If you take the time machine back to 2015, nobody thought that they would see the kind of things that we have seen over the last happen over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
it cost him.
It cost him hugely, yeah. But in the process, the mask has dropped, and we now see how this extraordinary, unaccountable power is being used.
All right. From Brando Commando, $20 super chat. I feel like something big is coming. Civil war in Ethiopia, China becoming more aggressive around the world, state versus state conflict in the US. I don't know. Trump seemed to be standing in the way of a lot of things that are now igniting. That's an excellent point. There's a lot going on in Ethiopia.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. And
yes.
I agree. Trump did seem to stand in the way from a lot of bad stuff happening.
Well, this is completely true. I mean, we are at one of those points in history where the big turn is coming. It's a much bigger turn, by the way, than the one which happened between 1989 and 91, when the Soviet Union and its system collapsed, because that was a localized system that existed in one part of the world. This does affect the entirety of humanity, and that is absolutely true. And it was an excellent point, and again, very well said.
And we are already at war, guys. We are at war with the globalists, and we are at war with the elite.
Oh, yeah.
There is an agenda that they're definitely trying to push, and
yes,
it's going to be a struggle.
Yes,
it's going to be a struggle. It is a class war that is going on right
now. Unequivocally.
Yeah. From Sparky, before the U.S. independence, most of people's lives throughout history was mostly misery. Maybe it's the default. Is the last 244 years an anomaly? That's also a very good point.
Well, indeed, that's a very, very astute point and a very wise one and very true. I hope it's wrong. Yeah. I mean, that's hope rather than knowledge.
Yeah, people had hard lives a long, long time ago.
Very
sure. From Justy Burger from New Zealand. Those are New Zealand dollars. Yes. My big question is the role of Russia in a UN-China globalist takeover.
Yes. Well, it's a very, very good question. I mean, at the moment, the Russians are working very closely with the Chinese. And I think this is going to continue for a long time. I mean, one of the things which happened a little while ago, it wasn't widely commented upon, but Putin slipped out that he talks to Xi Jinping. I think it's every week. It might have been even every day. I think it was every week. And that's interesting, because if you go to Putin's website, which, by the way, is a very detailed and very interesting website, none of these conversations are ever referenced there. So clearly there's a lot going on between China and Russia. There's a very close relationship there at the moment. But the Russians have always prized their own independence and their ability to go their own way. And I wonder how they will adjust to a situation where the Chinese become perhaps over dominant. I don't think this is going to be a question at the moment, because as I said, for the moment I think it suits the Russians to work with China. But what they will do in the end, we'll just have to see. I mean, don't think that nothing is yet played out. Nothing is certain. We talk about the rise of China. It's not a done thing. I think that's an important thing to say.
No, we also have to keep in mind that we're going to be looking at a Russia without Putin very soon.
Yes.
It's a big question mark. What does that mean?
Yes.
We haven't seen a Russia without Putin in 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to watch. And of course, a very powerful Chinese hegemon would mean that Russia has them on their border.
Yes.
And there have been territorial disputes. Not that I'm saying anything happens.
No.
I'm not saying anything happens, but it's definitely a variable that Russia hasn't had to deal with.
Yes. No, exactly. I mean, and I happen to think that Russia will also get stronger too. And that may make the Chinese a bit nervous about the Russians also, because, I mean, the Russians also have the pull towards Europe and the West. It's a complicated country, and it can never be predicted exactly how things will turn out there. But of course, if it's going to start shifting westward, then it has to find receptive partners in the West, and they're not there at the moment, and that has to be said too.
All right, from Michelle. Sorry, guys, I should know better. I get kicked off the other day. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Michelle. Thank you very much for that super chat and for your questions. We appreciate it. From Sparky, McCarthy's known as Ryan Jr. Hope he's changed.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I have to say,
I have heard that he is a type of Ryan protege.
He may very well be. I mean, so far, I have to say, he's been, he spoke very warmly about Trump and actually went out of his way to say that Trump played an absolutely critical role in achieving the Republican gains in the House that happened in the election. So we'll see what comes of that. Yeah.
From Neda, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Neda. From Life of Brian, a robust civil disobedience movement is necessary and will require liaisons with sympathetic members of law enforcement and the military.
Well, what is needed in the United States is a grassroots political movement. I think that is beginning to evolve and emerge. I think it will grow. I'm not here to suggest its tactics, but certainly it needs to be organized and it needs to be effective, and it needs first and foremost to establish its own information space.
Yeah. From Mark B, $4.99 super chat. I don't think Trump survives to run in 2020. They will go after him through the courts, with New York already at it. Even Trump has limits to resources. True, they are going after him in New York.
They are going after him in New York, but I have to say, what I've heard about that suit, is that it isn't terribly strong. I can't really see what else there is. There was actually a rather semi-humorous article. I think it was by Peter Van Buren, who's a rather astute man, on the American Conservative, in which he was saying that the only other case is, the Stormy Daniels one. And then he went through that, and I mean, he showed what an utterly ludicrous case that would be if anybody tried to bring it, alleging a campaign finance violation. So, at this moment in time, I can't really see what these cases that we're hearing about against Donald Trump would be. He has been the most investigated man in history. He has been the subject of more investigations than almost anybody else I can ever remember. And the extraordinary thing is, hardly anything of nothing of any significance really has come up. So if they're going to pursue more court cases against him, they'll have to do a lot better, it seems to me, because up to now, it's been absolutely no show with anything.
From Interim President Toilet Sauce, €20 super chat. Fun fact, Germany's prosecutors are completely dependent on the Minister of Justice. The ruling party or coalition is thus able to protect itself. That's why Ursula von der Leyen is not in prison and will never be.
Oh, this is so true, but it isn't just true of Germany. It's true of most European countries, I'm sorry to say. I think France and Italy, especially France, take that to a whole extra level. In Italy, the criminal justice process is completely politicized and can be used in extraordinary ways.
Yeah, well, Ursula von der Leyen, prison, she got promoted way up.
Like Christine Lagarde did. I mean, all these people. Or I was reading this extraordinary. There's been an extraordinary article about Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who was at one point looking as if he was going to take over the IMF, and who had even been talked about as former, future president of France. And my goodness, I mean, the way this man conducted his life, everybody knew about it, and he just kept on rising. It's really quite astonishing.
Yeah, then they took him out. Moon Swan, Silver.
Well, they took it. What the Americans did. The Americans did. The French never would have done.
Yeah. Moon Swan, Silverlight. One last question from me. Why do these elites hate the working class so much? It's pretty vile.
Because they're afraid of it. Because they're afraid. They're always afraid. I mean, that's. I mean, I think it's something that Alex in an earlier video was talking about. That Bill Gates. He saw one instance where Bill Gates got really frightened, and you could see the underlying fear. And this is always true. I mean, particularly elites that feel insecure about the way they've achieved power are always afraid of what the great majority of the people, not just the working class, but all of those people, really think of them and what they're about, what they're really about. So that's why. And fear always leads to anger, and anger always results in hate. Somebody once put it, very Dostoevsky, I've quoted this before, that we always hate, the people we hate are those we have wronged.
Yeah, the elites are full of fear. They believe in nothing. They believe in absolutely nothing. They have no belief in any higher power whatsoever, and they cling on to everything of this world.
Yes.
And it scares them to death.
Absolutely.
It scares them to death. Loss and being not being part of the inner crowd, being ostracized and all that stuff. You can see it in people like Bill Gates. These people were most likely tormented at very young ages.
Yes.
From Vladimir Sirma, 5-year super chat. We're at the end of capitalism right after the USSR collapsed. West put a control shot in themselves too.
Well, we'll see. I mean, certainly capitalism as we once knew it. I mean, it's what we have today. What we see so much of in the United States today is not capitalism as it existed, say, in the 1950s or 1960s. I mean, this is a very strange and very bizarre system, dependent so much on financial creation by the central banks, financial engineering by people in Wall Street, information control. It's not really the capitalism that, say, Adam Smith imagined.
From Brando Commando, $10 super chat. This is breaking now, but a bizarre lawsuit coming out of Nevada and California are claiming that New California and New Nevada are throwing their support behind the Texas lawsuit.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
New California and New Nevada. That's interesting.
No. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, we'll do a video on the lawsuit. I mean, we could talk about the lawsuit and stuff.
I think we can
on YouTube and any other videos where we're. Oh, by the way, we are going to do videos on covering the election, but we'll just post them on BitChute and Odyssey and Rumble.
Correct.
So make sure to subscribe to us on those platforms to get that video content.
Yeah.
Given YouTube's new terms.
Yes.
Changes. So we are going to be doing a lot of election coverage. Yes. What we can put on YouTube, we'll put on YouTube. Other stuff that we can't put on YouTube will be on Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute. You'll find all those links right under this video.
Yes.
And let's see the next super chat from Flying Boar. Update on Belarus and Lukashenko.
It's very good question. Protests still take place. They happen on Sundays on a sort of regular as clockwork. They've got steadily smaller. He is now, Lukashenko, he's still very much there. I think he's basically seen this off. The European Union is going to pile on sanctions on him. I think the US is too. Always a sign, by the way, that they feel that, their strategy, their attempt to remove him has failed. And he's now quarreling with Ukraine. which he had always sought to maintain good relations with, because, of course, Ukraine is backing the Europeans on this one. So that has left him with no real option but to cozy up more to Russia. And that's what's basically happening. Russian influence in Belarus has grown.
Yeah. From Sparky, $5 super chat. Older government officials get their info from the mainstream media. They think their Facebook feed gives them the internet angle when they look at the grandkids' pics.
This is completely true, and it's not just true of older government officials. It's true, I'm afraid, of many people. I mean, if we're talking about Britain, I mean, I can say with confidence that people of a certain age and above still get their news overwhelmingly from legacy media, traditional media. They don't really see much outside it, and I'm afraid that does, to an extraordinary degree, shape their view.
All right, that's everything.
Wow.
Got a ball.
Wow.
Great. Good live stream.
Well,
we'll be
brilliant.
Doing more of these, guys, and keep in mind to follow us on BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble, guys. Actually, BitChute is really picking up a lot of users, guys, and a lot of good content. There has been a pretty big exodus over to BitChute, and I know Rumble is also taking off, as is Odyssey. But
Yes.
I've been looking at the traction that we get on BitChute, and it's pretty incredible.
Excellent.
Incredible. So make sure to check us out there. And like I said, whatever we can put on YouTube, given the new change of rules that they've put into place, we'll put on there. And whatever we can't, we'll put it onto BitChute and Rumble and Odyssey. And the reason we're doing that, guys, is it has nothing to do with deep platforming or any stuff like that. It's just the fact that when we put stuff up on YouTube that they don't like, they're just going to take the video down. So
Exactly.
There's no reason to even deal with it if they're just going to take it down. So
precisely.
We'll tailor some special content on those other platforms. Really good live stream, guys. Thank you very much, Spartan Warrior Queen. Once again, you are a lifesaver. And what else? What else do we have to announce? Duran Shop. Check us out on the Duran Shop. Pick up some merch. Patriotic Beacon, Patriot Legacy 3, Duran 20. You get 20% off on that when you use that code. And the contest is still running. You could win the blue camouflage flashlight, and you can also get a free Duran shirt as well. And I think that is it. Anything else you want to add?
No, just to say, as always, it's enormously stimulating and really, really exciting. And thank you very much for coming on this live stream. We look forward to seeing you again next week. And please follow us on our other platforms and sign in to our next week programs.
And remember, Discord server.
Yes.
Server down below, the link for that as well. And check to make sure you're still subscribed, because we also know that YouTube has been unsubscribing a lot of people who deliver content like the content we deliver. But just make sure you're still subscribed to our channel. And that's it. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend. And we'll be live with you guys real soon again. And we are tracking every story as best we can, because there's a lot of news that we need to discuss. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening.